The reason why the amateur golfer struggles is they don't have the skill set to putt well.
Okay.
And then on top of that, they don't have a technique that is precise enough for them to be skillful. Amateur golfers need to improve their skill set, number one.
Yep.
And usually when their skill set improves, the technique starts to start to evolve. Then they need to get a technique that's precise enough to deliver the club face relatively square, to deliver the loft, and the energy transfer. So it's amateur golfers actually can improve the most and improve the fastest.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Today we're going to be talking about putting and making more putts, especially making more putts where it counts, which is, if you look at the statistics, it really matters how good you are from 8 feet and in. From 8 feet to about 33 feet matters a little less. That's more of like kind of like what they call the 2-putt zone. And then beyond is like where you can start to gain strokes again beyond 33 feet. But if you're really good from 8 feet and in, which means so what does really good mean? That means basically from 3 feet and in, making effectively everything. Tour pros make about 99% of these, about 95% of these, and then they're also here at 3 feet. They're making in the 90s percentage. So if you can get really good from in there, and then once you start to get from 3 feet to 8 feet, you got to keep your percentage high, but then it's going to start, every inch you go out, it starts getting exponentially worse and worse and worse. But if you can get rock solid from here and in, and then give yourself a ton of putts that go in, or even at least have a chance through like a really good process, you're going to be so much better of a putter. So I talked to what I think is the #1 coach in the world in putting, which is David Orr. So I got to talk to David for like 2 hours. So you're going to see clips of that interview, and I'll put up a longer form one here at Be Better Golf for people who want to see that.
You got to be able to finish. And what's interesting is if you're really clean from, say, 3 to 6 feet, I can't even remember the stat, but Matt Fitzpatrick made 67 out of whatever from a short distance this weekend. I mean, when you're clean with the short ones, that's #1. You don't have to be perfect, but just you can't be missing the little chippy ones, the little real short ones, right?
Right.
And then also not getting your not 3-putting too much. 3-putts happen sometimes. We'll talk about why those happen, but putting is just one of those things that you have to do. It's an arranged marriage.
I'm going to try to now give you kind of like a boiled down version of that, so I can take like, okay, what is the actionable, useful stuff that I can take from that interview, and I'll cut in some clips from David. So there's going to be a high-tech solution, a low-tech solution, and things that you can do right away to get better at putting. So first, the high-tech solution. So David and I both use this thing called HACKMOTION. I have it here. When I was first using the HACKMOTION with putting, I was assuming that, okay, like I don't want the wrist to change at all. I want to drive this with the rocking of my shoulders, and this should really stay the same. But then I saw a talk that you gave at the PGA show that said, that was saying something very different, where as far as like, hey, the wrist shouldn't be like this frozen thing during the putting motion. So kind of talk about the role of like having a little bit of life in this flexion and extension during the golf stroke.
Yeah, so I think if we're inside of, say, 5 feet, you would probably want minimal to no risks.
Okay.
So I think it changes depending on the length of the putt. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. So to say a blanket statement that the wrists don't move, I think would be false.
Yeah. Especially
if you're putting from 40, 50, 60 feet.
Yep.
Now, if you said from 3 feet, you don't want to move your wrists, then I would agree with that. Yeah. And there are certain types of strokes where you do lock the wrist. So, for instance, if I did a brush stroke or a lead arm lock where I move my axis of the club more toward my lead side of my body, like this, then I might want to feel like there's no wrist movement at all. But you need to understand that the segment above the wrist is the forearm. So what my forearm is doing changes my wrist. All right, so if I'm coming through the ball and the trajectory of my forearm is upward, I just increased wrist extension. If the trajectory of my forearm is actually down the right forearm angle of approach, I just added flexion.
Yeah, and
so
loft.
Here I added extension. You can see even this lead wrist went into a flatter position.
Mm-hmm.
Here I'm going into a little bit of a throw. I just added extension. Here I added flexion, but it's the trajectory of the forearms.
Yeah.
So getting back to the wrists, I wouldn't say that we're actively trying to use them. I think a lot of people misinterpreted what I said.
Okay.
Oh, David Orr said to use wrists.
Yeah.
I didn't. I said the wrist move.
Right. The wrists are affected by the weight of the club in transition.
The inertia of the club, I think some people are guilty of holding the club loosely versus lightly. Like learning to hold I tell people, if you've ever played a saxophone or a musical instrument, you have pressure, like each valve, each finger is a key. Yeah. So do you see how I've got feel with my fingers, pads, not the tips, but the pads? But if you have a loose wrist, then the club's going to flop around in your hand. So
right.
I think loose grip versus light grip has been a huge, I guess, mistake. So
you can hold it. You can hold it lightly and still be very precise, but loosely like implies this kind of sloppiness that we want to get away from.
And you asked me what was one of the differences at the beginning of this video.
Yeah,
tour player is holding it like a neurosurgeon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, whereas the average golfer is just holding it loosely because they were told that make sure you hold it loosely.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, or lightly, and lightly to them is letting go.
Yeah.
As opposed to that precision being the thumb, the forefinger, the middle finger, the wrist being very precise.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So that's the difference.
What David was saying was basically when you go, so I have the hack motion on here. The green line is going to represent this to this, okay? Flexion, extension. And then the blue line is going to represent how much twisting there is, okay? All right, so here's putting stability here in hack motion. So see how the blue number is going to be how much twist there is, okay? And the green number is how much flexion extension there is. The thing that you'll realize when you do this is that those two numbers are not things that can be completely isolated, like only this and this or only this and this. They go together. But just as an example, so here's a normal one. Okay. So on that normal one there, you can see the flexion, the twisting, which is the blue line, was pretty flat. And it was all inside that green zone, which is good. And then the flexion extension from address to the top. So that shows kind of my tendency. What I like is a little loading and a little unloading, but it's very little. It's like in that range. What I didn't understand about what David was saying was that I thought there was quite a bit of that even in these short ones, this kind of golden 8 feet that Dave Pelz talks about and a lot of people talk about where it's really important to be. What David said was that you really want to minimize that on these putts. There might be a little play, but it's going to be pretty stable on these closer putts. All right, so if I was going to do one that was like a 30-foot putt or a really long putt, that would be okay. So there we can start to see there's a lot more life in the wrist with this. I start to even get outside of what the recommended zone is for my flexion extension, which is normal for me because I like the feeling of this to that, but that's something that I should minimize. With all this stuff, I think you should try to get that blue line, which is this to this, as basically as flat as possible, because this is all kind of to the arc. So we're going to hear David talk his opinion about this stuff now. Give me some good homework to do with the popsicle stick and especially with the hack motion. And I'm going to put together a video of doing some of the things that David told me. I know you haven't seen my stroke yet, but like what are some good ways? Because I want to explore
more, I want to get a little bit more in depth and kind of figure out what exactly it is that I do. So what are some good explorations and things that I can do? One with the hack motion and two with some low tech things that I can do put together.
Yeah. So with the hack motion, I want you to hit a 3-footer, a 15-footer, and a 30-footer, and see what's different with your wrists, moving from extension to flexion.
Yeah.
Do it with the lead wrist and the trail wrist.
Mm-hmm.
Probably lead wrist first and then trail wrist.
And is it ideally they're moving kind of the same in those three, or not really?
Depends on the orientation of your grip.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So HACKMOTION is this device that is on my wrist now that is showing me this stuff. It's an amazing device to work with. And they just came out with a new version that is like half the price of what they have normally had. You'll be able to do biofeedback, and you'll be able to do a putting mode and all kinds of stuff you can do with just this new consumer version that's a lot cheaper. So what I'm going to do, the first thing that I'm going to do with this is I'm going to go from smaller putts to larger putts and see how far I can go and stay in that green zone all the way through the ball. So there, I'm in the green zone all the way through. So I'm going to go a little harder and see if I can stay in that green zone. See, I just came out of it just a little bit at the end, and then I also twisted. So now I'm going to try to back it off again. Okay, let's see that one. Great. So the challenge starts to be is like, okay, you can flow and make a pretty good stroke, keeping this relatively in a zone at a slower speed, like that. But as you get more and more, can you keep that line fairly flat? So the key to that is using a combination of your body and your hands. Your hands are really the sensors. They're super, super important in putting. They're almost everything in putting because they're your sensors on how hard you're going to hit it, where they are in space, and really everything comes down to the hands being these amazing sensors. But your body has got to be more the engine of it. Now, David talks about, I used to call it like, okay, what's driving your putting stroke, or what is like running the show in your putting stroke. He calls it prime movers. So for HACKMOTION, this is mostly what I'm doing when I'm working on my putting stroke, is I'm trying to make short putts here and keep those lines in the zone there. So that one was very good in the zone. I don't mind a little raising and lowering of that green line because I like to feel a little bit of this play in my right wrist. Then I like to go firmer and firmer and try to keep that same feeling. So now I'm going to feel like I go twice as far. Okay. That was good. See, I went twice as far. Now I'm starting to come out of that zone. Now I'm going to go even further. See if I can stay in the zone there. And for me, when my body shuts off, then it starts to twist. So I've got to keep the body moving in transition and through. That was twice as far. Okay, really good on the rotation, but then I just released it more, which is all right. So. And I think practicing this way, for when you're practicing your stroke is maybe a little overrated in golf, but I think people just practice it wrong. Like, I think if you're practicing your stroke, you should be practicing your stroke. So that was great. So that's what I'm doing this ladder drill up and down where I can see like, okay, I want to stay in that zone. It's okay to have like a little bit of life, and it's also okay to practice the wrong thing, but you just don't want it to start, you don't want any of the extremes, okay? And you really, this type of biofeedback and training is very difficult to replicate without the tech because sometimes you just can't feel what you're doing. And when you start doing this, it'll start to open you up to feels like you didn't really know that you were having. So if I go again, I want it to. Great. So stayed in the green the whole time. All right, good. All right, so now let's talk about a low-tech solution that David told me about that I think is really, really interesting.
Let me give you, I told you, popsicles.
Stick. All right, cool.
Yeah, so HACKMOTION, if you're going to really measure the pronation supination, you would have to have another sensor. So I've added a popsicle stick, and it's now you can see the popsicle stick is vertical.
Yeah.
Here it's pronated, and here it's supinated. What's interesting, if you watch the popsicle stick, if I went into some extension with some ulnar deviation with that wrist sequence, you can see I'm getting some pronation. I'm twisting the club closed.
Yeah.
Right? Do you see that?
Yeah.
And if I'm going through the ball and I'm changing from extension to flexion with some ulnar, you can see the forearm is actually twisting open. So through these wrist sequencing, you get twisting. That makes sense? So I actually use a hairband and popsicle sticks for the rotational component. So this would be flexion extension.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm in ulnar, you can see it can affect it versus being neutral. Makes sense? So the flexion extension is affecting the loft.
Okay.
But you can also see that this popsicle stick's moving backwards. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So that's adding loft, and then this is delofted.
What really matters is where your face is pointed at impact. And if we talk about where the face is pointed at impact, then we got to talk about like where the right wrist and palm is pointed at impact, because this is really kind of your aiming device in putting. And a pencil or he does it with popsicle sticks, and just put it on here like this. Like this. Again, and put that around your wrist. Like that, see? And what this is, it's kind of like an awareness drill, where you have this on here like this, and you just want this thing to feel as if the face and your wrists, and your wrist, where this popsicle stick is or pencil is, are right in a line. See that? So I want that face and that wrist angle to be the same. So what happens to the wrist will affect the face. What happens to the face is because of the wrist. So you're kind of putting 2 and 2 together in your mind when you do this. This is really stable through impact. So there, adjust this just a little bit. Yeah, there you go. So there, and so the drill is hit a lot of putts, 8 feet and in, really 4 feet and in, where you're trying to get this square at and through impact. So if I go here, that was good, still in the range. So just by practicing, there's not like a specific drill that David told me as far as like, okay, hit 4 putts from here, 6 putts from here, 7 putts from there, or do this. It's really like an awareness thing. It's trying to get your mind to make the connection where, hey, the club head is being controlled by something. That something is your wrist. And then you have to decide what is your prime mover in putting. So your prime mover could be, from what I understood it, it could be the ribs, or the shoulders, or the right arm, or any combination of those things at different percentages.
How can somebody discover what the best driver of their golf swing is?
Yeah, so your
putter stroke, sorry, I should
your
say.
prime mover.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite subjects. So what's interesting, remember we talked about people talking about putting with the shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have 2 shoulders.
Yeah, like recently we saw Jordan Spieth has that harness on and with a stick across it.
Yeah. Here, I'll give everybody the cheaper version.
Okay.
You take a 40-inch Take a 40-inch rubber band.
Yep. Pull up assist band.
Yep. And then you crisscross it in the back. And you put your arms through it like this.
Oh, and you're good to go.
Yeah. So you just saved yourself a lot of money.
Yep.
Now, first of all, it's going to tend to retract the shoulder blades back.
Yeah.
That's only for a torso-driven stroke. Do you have your shoulder blades back?
Right.
So actually, with a shoulder girdle stroke, you actually want your abduction of the shoulder blades. Do you see that? Everybody see that?
Yep.
It's not this way. It's this way. So you actually want your shoulder blades this way, so your upper arm is in front of your rib cage.
Yeah.
Not pinned to your rib cage. You see the difference?
Yep.
It's here. This is a shoulder stroke. Now, one of the misconceptions is that by putting a stick through here, right?
Yeah. It's funny because Jordan did it. Now I've seen like a ton of people do it.
Yeah, but now hang on a second. This is not how the shoulders work.
Okay.
Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah, because you were saying the shoulders, but before you walk back there, you said the shoulders, there's two different ways that the shoulders move.
Oh, there's two shoulders.
Oh, two. Okay, gotcha.
Got it. And then there's a rib cage. So we got a lead shoulder, a rib cage, and a trail shoulder.
Okay.
I've never done this before, so this is good. So a lot of people think the shoulders have this bar across them. Okay, that's not how they work.
Okay.
All right, this is a bad concept. First of all, bad concept. It's not how they work.
Okay.
Okay? This is how they work. First of all, your shoulder consists of your clavicle, your scapula, your upper arm, and your glenohumeral joint. It's called the shoulder complex for a reason.
Yeah.
And the design of that shoulder complex is for gliding and reaching. So do you see how I have a left shoulder? Yes.
Yep.
And a right shoulder? Yes.
Yeah, two independent things.
Good. They have to be coordinated. You have to coordinate both shoulders gliding on top of a turning and tilting rib cage.
Mm-hmm.
The rib cage is turning and tilting. It's part of your axial skeletal system. Your left shoulder and your right shoulder are part of your appendicular skeletal system. So you have a left shoulder and a right shoulder, and they have to be coordinated. That would be a shoulder stroke.
So rather than using a true shoulder stroke, most people, when they put the stick across or they go like this, are they like freezing the shoulders and doing more of just a rib only?
Yes, which is torso driven.
Oh, okay.
So torso driven would be, these are retracted. Yep. Connected.
Mm-hmm.
And then your ribs are, look at how much more movement are in the ribs. You see that? The ribs are the prime movers like this. And if you could see me from down the line.
Yeah, we can.
I actually do well being short.
Right.
This would be my rib cage. How much arc is there? A lot.
Yeah, a lot, yeah.
A lot.
In quite a bit.
Yeah, now watch. If I do shoulder driven, shoulder driven, what's different?
Much more down the line.
Much more lateral movements in the shoulder joints.
I love that word you said a minute ago, where you said it's shoulder glide, because you can feel both shoulders gliding above
on top of a turning and tilting rib cage.
For me, what I like is to be mostly right arm with some shoulders. So because I'm shoulders and right arm, now that will be a little bit different of a setup. That'll be more like this, more rounded, more into the putt here. That's an extreme, but that's really what I'm trying to do. Okay, so again, with the pencil drill here. And what you find is that all these putting things are connected. So the real thing that gets that line nice and flat inside that green zone is tempo. So if you're struggling with your putting or you just want to get to another level of putting, what you really should work on is face angle at impact and tempo. That's the two things that you always see PGA Tour players or professional golfers working on before a tournament is tempo and then start line. So for start line, you can do different gate drills. The thing I like more than anything, far and away, for start line is to use this kind of specialized yardstick that I created with, it's like a velvet yardstick, so it takes some of the roll out. And I just do this again and again and again every day. I do cycles of these for 5 weeks, a certain amount a day. So you can see just by concentrating on the start line there, it starts cleaning up some of that stuff. Then the other thing you see them working on a lot is tempo. So that's just like a metronome. I like 75 beats per minute or something like that. And go to 75 beats per minute metronome. So the best thing that I can recommend is put this on your right wrist like this, set the metronome somewhere where you can hit putts, even if you're just hitting into a pillow or whatever, where you're trying to hit different lengths of putts all to the same beat. Do this for like a couple minutes, like 6-7 minutes a day. So just by improving my tempo, you can see I was able to stay in the zone a lot more. So the best thing I can tell you to do with this pencil drill is just hit lots of 8 feet and in putts, but then also get like a pillow or something, or somewhere you can do it at home, and just hit lots of different ball speed putts into like a pillow or something like that, that all have this same tempo.
Most putts are missed because of poor judgment.
Mm-hmm.
What are we judging?
Okay. Most people assume that their judgment was pretty good, but then some technique went wrong.
Yeah, that's the full swing mindset.
Okay.
The problem is full swing mindset doesn't work in putting. Most putts are missed because of before you even make a stroke. Write that down.
Okay.
Most putts are missed before you even execute a backswing.
Mm-hmm.
They're missed because you misjudged the distance. You misjudged the break direction. You misjudged the break amount. You misjudged the slope, that it was uphill versus downhill versus level.
Or like you misjudged like the speed, like you decided I'm going to, yeah.
Yeah. So most putts are missed prior to you even making a stroke.
And then same way, most putts are then if you're going to make it, it's really what you did before you pulled it back.
Yeah, well, a lot of it. So I think good judgment's number one. Like you've got to judge the distance, the slope, the break direction, break amount, and then where you intend to aim.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. Now, and we'll talk about lines on balls and all that kind of stuff later. Okay. Then I need to prepare. I need to trigger my walk-in. Whether I take practice strokes or not. How do I look at the hole? Do I see it in my mind's eye?
All right, that's it. So thank you so much to David Orr for coming on Be Better Golf. We're going to go out and visit David in North Carolina. I think Jack and I are going to go out and see him and do more putting videos. So you got to be subscribed to see those. So click the subscribe button. Also, if you're interested in the HACKMOTION, they have the HACKMOTION, different levels of it. I have the pro one, but they have a new version that is cheaper that does a lot of what we're talking about today. It has a putting mode, it has a full swing mode, and it's really like if you want to personally get better, it has everything you need in this new version. And it's really cool, and it's like half the cost of what it was previously. It's still monitoring my swing. And you can get a discount with HACKMOTION if you use the code in the link to this description. They set me up with David, and I really appreciate that. All right, so final putt. None of this means anything. You got to put yourself under some pressure, right? None of this means anything if I can't make this 7-foot putt here. This green runs at like a 19, but it's fairly flat. It's up. It's in. All right, and I stayed in the zone. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. Bye.